Welcome, everyone. Illinois Extension is happy to welcome back Devin Bronstein from the Illinois Office of Broadband with her panel. Thank you for providing this second part of a two webinar bit this week on the application assistance for Connect Illinois. So happy to have you on, and thank you for your time. Devin, you can take it from here.
Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning back in. For those who joined us yesterday for part one of our templates review, we will be going over 3 additional templates today. So I will start with just some background and recap. We'll try and go through this quickly and so we can get to the meat of our content. And then we'll have an overview of the fixed wireless template from my colleague Liz, one of our subject matter experts. And then Sandeep will be going over the budget template and the pro forma. So with that, I will dive in. Starting with a recap here. As folks know, BEAD is a federal program, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, that allocates $42.45 billion to connect every last unserved and underserved household and business to quality and affordable high-speed broadband, in addition to connecting every community anchor institution to gigabit symmetrical service. NTIA has communicated that changes to the program are coming following a review by the Department of Commerce, but we are ready to adjust as needed, and for now want to make sure we're getting all of the information we have out to you so you can start building your applications. Of this pot, Illinois was allocated $1.04 billion to connect our 175,000 eligible locations statewide. And this is where we are in the process. We met several requirements and completed steps over the last roughly 2 years now. We've wrapped up our first subgrantee application wave just last week. So in wave 1, we received 238 applications from 26 different entities proposing to serve 86% of the state. Wave 1 had 2 requirements to participate. First, projects had to be end-to-end fiber projects. And second, they had to contain at least 10% of hard-to-serve project area units. So we made awards last week on May 27th. These are preliminary awards. And we have kicked off Wave 2, which closes on July 16th at 5 p.m. Wave 2 invites applications from all reliable broadband technologies. And so you can find our updated available project areas on the map and start your application. And then we will have an optional Wave 3 should there still be locations left to be picked up. And this is where we will also consider alternative technology as needed. So this is a summary of those 3 waves, pretty similar to what I just shared. And a reminder that the building blocks of projects here in Illinois are project area units. So these are clusters of eligible locations no more than 5 miles apart. So when you go to our project area selection tool, which we demoed yesterday, you'll see kind of clusters of locations that share a color, and those all belong to the same project area unit. So folks can select one or more of those to build their project application. All right, so some quick overviews on the application, a little refresher, and then we will start our demo. So there are 3 steps to apply for the Connect Illinois BEAD program. The first is the entity submission form. So any entity who's applying has to submit their entity form just one time. And this requests information from you about demonstrating that you can meet the financial, operational, and technical requirements of the BEAD program. So we will evaluate those requirements and confirm that you're eligible. If you've already submitted this form, no need to submit again. We just ask that you make any updates as needed if you did not qualify initially. If you participated in the pre-qualification process over the summer, you'll have an opportunity to indicate which qualifications you have already been approved for from the letter from our office, and then you do not need to resubmit those, with the exception of information on any RDOF or CAF2 projects. We're looking for updated information. So this form is one and done, and then you'll want to save that ID that you receive once you submit this form, and that's kind of your identifier throughout this whole process. Then you can submit one or as many project submission forms as you want. So every project that you apply for that will be kind of scored as its own project will be associated with your entity. So you can submit one, you can submit several, and the project form asks for information specific to your project. So it'll be a series of PAUs. We'll look for your network designs, your budgets, your pro forma, and various other requirements for the project. And you may submit one project submission form per project. So you will likely submit several of these. And then finally, the application submission form. This kind of ties the bow on your application. So you'll do a final form that just asks for basic information about your entity, the ID that you get from the entity form and the project form, and then you submit this very easy form. Just helps us meet a state requirement to get everything documented on our end by 5 p.m. on the deadline. So to provide a visual aid, the entity submission form looks like this. If you participated in pre-qual over the summer, it should look pretty familiar, but just a basic, filling in information, uploading files, various selection opportunities here. Project form looks similar, and all of this information is available in our application guidebook. So because our platform doesn't allow us to have folks create profiles and save your progress, we ask that you kind of get familiar with the form, look through the guidebook, and then save all of your documentation, separately in a folder on your computer, and then upload it all at once. And please do not wait until close to that 5 p.m. deadline, because in the event that the system gets overloaded or you need technical assistance, we might also be overloaded at that time as well. So please prep, submit early, and we are happy to help ahead of that deadline. And then finally, this is the application submission form. Pretty simple, just kind of formally gets it in the system for our review. So we are going to be talking about the second half of our templates today. And the templates are streamlined ways to allow us to evaluate applicants' ability to meet standard qualifications for the BEAD program. So the boxes on this screen indicate each of the buckets of qualifications, and then those highlighted in orange are qualifications that have an associated template. And when we talk about a template, this is really just a standard form or standard document that we ask that you fill in, and it allows us to kind of review applications, apples to apples, process things in a streamlined way, and avoid back and forth and delays of additional requests for you. So yesterday we reviewed the project milestone template, and we reviewed the project area selection template and tool. Today we will shift over to the fixed wireless access template. This is required for fixed wireless projects. Then we'll review the project budget schedule and capital investment schedule. This is required for all projects. And the pro forma, which is also required for all projects. In our previous round, the pro forma template was encouraged, but we also did accept other versions of, another company's pro forma approach. But given the level of detail that we're looking for and some of the back and forth and questions that it led to, we did kind of ultimately land on using this template across the board. So we thank you in advance for your cooperation with using this template. I think it'll make things easier for all of us across the board. And we are always happy to sit with you in office hours every Tuesday and Thursday, 1 to 2 p.m. Central Time, to support you in answering any of your questions. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Liz, one of our subject matter experts supporting the team, to walk us through the fixed wireless template. So Liz, just let us know if you have any challenges with screen sharing.
I believe I'm okay. Can you all hear me?
Yep, crystal clear.
And see my screen?
Yep, indeed.
Okay, for companies that are proposing fixed wireless solutions, the state is going to require you to fill out an additional template. This is a fixed wireless design template. It's designed to organize key radio parameters in a way that the state can evaluate these easily. The schema for the template is organized in a way that any RF tool can easily export these fields. And the you'll see light blue headers and black headers in the document. The light blue headers are for text, generally kind of a free-form string. The black headers are looking for a singular numeric value. So if you feel like you need to put a text value into a numeric field, you're probably heading down the wrong way, the wrong path, and probably need to get into office hours and help us understand what you're trying to do. The spreadsheet is organized in a manner to where each one of the specific tower sites is on one tab. All of the sectors that belong to those tower sites are in another tab. The BSL locations that you guys will try to be serving is will be in another tab, as well as some radio information on the modulation and coding scheme uh, tables that typical vendors supply uh, your companies. And then just a page for network assumptions and what some of your design assumptions are. And I'll and then there's a tab for applicant information. The applicant information is just your contact information and name and secondary contacts when applicable. Uh, the first tab, and I've populated this with sort of uh, a fake design. It includes site name, the latitude and longitude, the elevation of the site, the address, uh, the backhaul type that that's being given to the site. It'll either be wireless or wired. The overall capacity of the backhaul, what type of structure it is, a monopole, a building, uh, a grain silo, or something like that. And for license spectrum, the call signs uh, that this site is within. It may be multiple call signs, and if it's a new or existing tower. And as you can see here, I've created a site named Liz1, given it some coordinates, an address, and this is a typical example of what we would be expecting to see. As we move over to the next tab, the sectors tab, let me zoom this up a little bit so you all can see it better. We have three sectors for that given tower. Liz A, Liz B, and Liz C. Uh, the we need to know the parent the name of the parent site, which is the Liz 01, which is or D001, which is on the previous tab. Then specifically antenna gains, the transmit antenna gain, the transmit antenna height above ground level, the pointing azimuth of the antenna, any mechanical or electrical down tilt, uh, and then a pattern file name. And please include a PDF copy or a tabular copy of the pattern file that the design uses for that given sector. That sector's transmit power per channel, total line loss, and effective isotropic radiated power (EIRP), and these are all in dBm, and then the line losses in dB and the antenna gains in dBi. Operating frequency bands, uh, the bands that the sector will be operating, channel bandwidths, And I've just put values here of 200 megahertz and the type of duplexing scheme. And this is time division duplexing. On the BSL locations tab, uh, you'll have a given BSL ID, which I believe you will get from the fabric, uh, the latitude and longitude of that given BSL, uh, its elevation, its address, the power, the CPE power, uh, and any losses from the CPE and the CPE antenna gain, whether this installation is indoor or outdoor. Uh, the downlink signal intensity, whether it's received signal power, RSRP for 3GPP type technologies, or if it's received signal level for non 3GPP type. And then the corresponding signal quality, which is can be labeled as RSRQ or for 3GPP technologies, and signal to noise ratio for non 3GPP technologies. The sector that serves the given BSL from the previous, it'll be one of the previous sectors identified in the sectors tab. Uh, the downlink maximum throughput. This is not the provision throughput. This is what uh, radio RF frequency or the physics of RF will maximum will allow at that given location. Uh, and then the corresponding predicted uplink maximum throughput. And then moving on to the uplink MCS table, you'll receive typically you'll get these from your radio vendors. And there's a generic name, and I've used QPSK and 64 QAM for modulation types. The channel bandwidth, it's required signal quality or SINR or whatever the metric is, and then the corresponding received signal level in a noise environment and its corresponding throughput for that level. And then for a higher level signal, uh, the same kind of information. Uh, as you can see, the the received signal level requirement for 91 megabits per second is higher than what it would be for 23 megabits per second. And then moving to the downlink tab is structured in a similar format. Uh, and basically, it's just a lookup from received signal level and signal quality to corresponding throughput. And on the final tab is the network assumptions. We ask for the maximum downlink and uplink throughput for a given technology that you're using. We ask what the maximum latency of the network will be. Uh, we ask for the outage average outage time, which is kind of predicted by probability and that kind of thing. The network availability, uh, what you feel the take rate for your network design would be, uh, what your oversubscription rate is in your design. And then for TDD specific technologies, the downlink to uplink channel ratio, and this is a 4.5 to 1 ratio. And then some other information about the number of typical antenna ports for a design, if MIMO is being used, the number of layers supported. Uh, if you're using a beamforming technology, what you expect the capacity gains to be. And then any kind of carrier aggregation techniques to improve throughput. Uh, and a short description of the element management system. Description of security to prevent unauthorized users. Uh, a brief description of how the scheduler can prioritize users. and a description of system redundancy. This network's configured as a ring network. Uh, and then that you attest that the proposed network will be constructed according to industry standards. And that's really it from what's required here. It's most of the information, again, can probably be exported from any kind of most RF tools export directly to CSV or to Excel, a lot of these parameters. So, and then of course, figuring out if you've got coverage on the BSL tabs is probably something that needs to be done before bidding on the project. So, uh, we're just asking for that information up front in a kind of a more granular sense than probably what you guys have seen in the past. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you for the overview. We can take questions at the end, but we do have around 3 minutes left in this section. So if folks did have questions about this template that they wanted to raise right now, we have a few minutes. Okay. Not hearing anything. And so we
There are some
will,
questions. There are some questions in the chat, though. One question, I think.
yep, I'll cover that one in the chat.
Okay, great.
Okay. Let's move on. So next, Sandeep will demo our project budget and capital investment schedule, and then we'll move on to the pro forma.
Great. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Fantastic. So, great to be here.
Sandeep, there's a button in the middle. You might want to just click allow. Oh,
Okay, great.
yeah, there we go.
Fantastic. And let me see if I can minimize this. Okay, great job, Liz. Hi, Devin. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here today. So my name is Sandeep Tuksali. I've been with the office for literally over 5 years. I joined when Matt Schmidt was the broadband director back in March or May of 2020, right during COVID, and came in to help start that program up. Design program design was sort of my focus, and coming up with the NOFO and the program materials like the application and the scoring rubric and other exhibits that we require all of you to fill out, the budget templates and so forth, and was heavily involved in reviewing your projects and scoring them and curing them. And I'm doing the same thing under Devin, great leader we have here to replace Matt. And so we are in the midst of, so just fast forward from 5 years now, we are now starting round 2 of BEAD, which is just amazing. 5 years ago, it was just a small program with a small staff, and now we're past Connect Illinois, and now we're into BEAD, and it's amazing to be here to talk about the budget and the pro forma financials. So that's my focus today, is to go through just having reviewed a lot of these projects, several of them, and been involved in the curing process. If you've applied either both in Connect Illinois or under the current round 1, you may have heard from me or others on our team. And so I want to sort of give you thoughts about just best practices about these 2 templates. And also for those of you who are new to the program, just give you a sort of a quick rundown about these templates. So the project budget, let me start with that first. So what is the purpose of having a budget? Well, there's 3 major, I'd say, principles, if not purposes. One is to make sure all of the costs that you are asking for to either expend through grants or your match are allowable. So that's a pretty simple or easy to understand assertion. Yeah, so and then there's a tab here that actually gets into every eligible cost. So we try to make this as dummy proof, so to speak, as possible. It's very detailed, and if you have a cost item that's not on here, I would not put it in your budget. Secondly, we want to make sure that I'll just leave this instructions tab on for a minute here, that all of these expenses or your budgets are comprehensive and detailed. We are in Illinois, it's about $1.04 billion of funding. We want to know where that money is going to. What exact expenditures are you all proposing? And if you have a very detailed, comprehensive budget, it also showcases that you're financially mature enough to actually participate in this program. We obviously are open to existing ISPs and new entrants and startups, but we want to make sure everyone, whether they've been doing broadband for decades or are new to the game, can at least produce a very comprehensive budget. And it protects yourself because you definitely don't want to be under budget, because that could obviously lead to a project being stranded, even though the awardee is obligated to fulfill the scope of the project once awarded. And the contingency obviously can address part of that gap, but we want to make sure that these budgets are not understated. On the opposite side, the third principle is we want to make sure that these projects are cost efficient. We have in Illinois a mandate to connect 165,000 locations. That's a lot of locations, a lot of broadband serviceable locations. We call them BSLs. And so we want to make sure that we're being cost efficient, that you're being cost efficient, and we'll validate that. And another way to think about cost efficiency is if you look at our scoring framework, 50 of the 100 points are about financial efficiency. You get 30 points for what we call minimum BEAD outlay, which is the grant you're requesting relative to the reference cost that we have, and it's a published number from CostQuest, what they believe is a fair grant amount. And so, and then 20% of the points come from how large your match is. And so if you have a very efficient budget, my thinking is this is how I think about it. You all probably have, because you've been working in these markets or these communities or plan to work in these communities, you probably have an idea for how much private capital you're willing to spend. So the extent to which you can be cost effective in your budgets means two things. One is your grant will be lower. And so you will have your grant will become lower since you have a fixed amount of match. And so that means your grant, your minimum BEAD outlay for the grant relative to the reserve price will be lower, which is a good thing. And then your match percentage as part of a lower budget will be higher. So you earn more points, and that's part of the objective here. So as far as us being able to use the scoring framework to find the most effective and efficient projects. So certainly we want to be cost efficient here. And also IOB has, in our office, having worked through Connect Illinois and in the round one of BEAD, we have a lot of internal cost benchmarks, cost per mile, labor cost per foot, cost of a pole replacement, cost of a drop. So we have a lot of internal benchmarks, and we'll obviously compare your budget indicators to what we have as benchmarks. And if we feel like any of either the units or the prices are out of the ordinary, we'll certainly ask about that. And we certainly will have the opportunity to negotiate with anybody who we believe has a budget or has a high quality project that scored well, but has a budget that might not be as efficient as we'd like. And we will certainly get into that negotiation. So here we are with the template. I'm going to quickly go through. There's lots of little tabs here, but the main one is this one. This is the big tab. But before I get there, I would just quickly review the instructions. It gives an overlay of this document and what tabs are where and the purpose of each tab and so forth. Here is basically where a lot of the work happens. And so you will, again, I'm going to be really quick here. I would certainly play with this budget if you haven't done so before. But the first column is the category. There are several. Again, these are all the major categories involved in planning and deploying a fiber project, from design engineering to permitting to project management. That's sort of the planning phase, to infrastructure acquisition and construction, and then post-construction subscriber activation and miscellaneous. And there's a contingency item as well. Contingencies, by the way, can be no more than 10% of the total grant amount. So there's a ledger for grant and match, and contingencies can be no greater than 10% of the grant side of the ledger. After you pick the category, you will basically put a quick, just a few words of what that item is. It's fiber materials, or labor cost for installation of fiber, or poles that need to be replaced. And then this column is really just to delineate if you have a pre-award or a closeout cost. Then this is where I really want to put some focus here. Unit types and unit quantities. We need this information. It shows detail, but it allows us obviously to do some of our benchmark analysis. And so if you're putting in, let's say you've got 50 miles of buried fiber that you want to install. You will put miles, for example, and then you will put 50 here, and then the cost per mile. We'd personally like to see, or not personally, but on behalf of the team, we'd like to see your actual labor cost per foot on a per foot basis. That helps us understand if anybody is proposing a very high, very expensive cost per mile. And so if again, and it just protects yourself, because if your cost per mile is exorbitant and we look at the budget and you don't have that detail, that's just a bad outcome. We will certainly ask about that. But if you say, hey, I expect a heavy degree of pole replacements for a good reason, not because a utility company wants to fund their maintenance and operations and upkeep based on the backs of the broadband program, but because those poles are just simply dated and they will not easily accommodate make ready. Please, say pole replacement and how many. If you're boring, if your project involves a high level of boring, we certainly would want to see that delineated here as opposed to kind of baked into a larger number. So please be detailed. I would imagine companies, we've several of our awardees to date, our preliminary awardees, I should call them, have not been as detailed as we like. I think there's some concern among some that they have a proprietary cost model or some negotiated rates that they don't want to share publicly. Well, that information is coming to our review team. We do not share these applications publicly. And so please be please lean more towards detail than being high level. Several of our applicants, kudos to them, have been very detailed, and it's made the review process much more efficient. And so if some folks can do it, I'm sure others can as well. So that's pretty much it. And then you will state here how much of that particular component is grant funded versus the match side of the ledger, so to speak. And I should have said anything in gray is auto-calculated. Anything that's not in gray is an input. So this is the main worksheet that you have. You may internally have a very detailed cost schedule, much more detailed than maybe even this, or it may have thousands of line items from your design tool. Again, we don't need every line item like that, but I would simply strike some balance between what you think is what would be considered high level versus micro detail, and I would certainly side on the side on detail. Let's see. Okay, the next tab is capital investment schedule. This is just a schedule along the same categories that we talked about earlier, but just to let us know from a planning perspective when those expenses will be incurred. And some of you know you get more points if it's a 2-year project versus a longer, 2 years or less. And so if you are proposing a 2-year project, yet we see costs running into years 3 and 4, we'll certainly ask about that. But pretty simple schedule. And after all that's done, your cost summary comes up, and that's basically a sum of the prior tabs. And so again, this is the main worksheet to focus on. And if you do a good job here, it makes our lives easier. And of course, the rest of the tabs go with that. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a primer into what's eligible or not. And so please do review it if you haven't. So I know we're taking questions at the end. I can just quickly pause while this is all fresh to see if there's any questions, or I can move on to the next template.
Yeah, I think we can pause after each one. So if folks have any questions, feel free to unmute or drop it in the chat, and we'll give it a minute or so.
Oh, as you're thinking about your questions, I do want to say one thing. I do have a little some reminder to me on some observations from round one. And so let me just go through those. Actually, I was going to go through them maybe at the end, but I think this might be a good time to do that. So some best practices. Here, I would say, so I'm just going through either best practices or challenges that we've seen with some of the applications. So one challenge, and I kind of alluded to this, is folks will basically not give us detail. So they'll put unit 1. That was very common. 1 unit for construction, and with the big lump sum, $3 million for construction with one unit. That does not do justice to a detailed, comprehensive budget. So Please, again, don't do that. There might be some information that you believe is proprietary, but again, this is what we need to really look at the budget efficiency and comprehensiveness and so forth. Um, Internal staff. If you have internal staff working on the project, please make those cost estimates based on actual cost, not market rates. We've seen some applications where they say, well, I have a construction team, and if I actually lent them out in the market, they would charge this much, commercially. And so they're putting the in-kind of those market rates as their contribution, as one of their match contributions. But please use actual cost to comply with our rules. For fiber placement, try to delineate between buried versus aerial. Again, many of our applicants did that, and thank you. Others just lumped all buried and aerial all together under one lump sum. It's helpful to know that. If you're burying 100%, we certainly want to know why. Um, and so, because we all know buried is more expensive than aerial, despite the challenges in sometimes getting pole access. But we do want to have that differentiation in the budget. We certainly will ask about that now in the application, and please do put that in the budget. Boring versus trenching. I know in Connect Illinois round 3, we had one company that was boring most of their project, and we like scratched our heads like, why would you do that? And they said, well, we're just trying to be really conservative. And I'm like, no, we can't. But by you being extra conservative on your cost analysis means that somebody else doesn't get an award. And so please, if you're boring versus trenching, please delineate that in your budget. Some of these costs that I consider to a degree non-linear. These are the ones I'm talking about here. Let's see. Permitting, management, let's see, design and engineering. When I say non-linear, they're not directly tied to how many miles. Yes, there's some direct, they are direct, sorry, I should say, they are somewhat directionally tied to the largeness of the project, but there are some economies of scale. So if you have a 300-mile project versus a 600-mile project, our thinking is that permitting, project management, design and engineering shouldn't necessarily be double. So we see some folks tying those to miles, and that's not sometimes the most logical outcome. And so, and if you're obviously applying for many applications and you plan to win, or if you're working across the state on other programs, we expect some synergies here in terms of the team that's working on the permitting, the project management, and some of these other nonlinear costs, like design and engineering. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. We also those costs are sometimes we have again lots of examples of projects we funded. We sort of know all the cost details like we should be aware of. And if we're seeing design engineering, permitting, management as a high percentage of your total budget, that's going to be obviously a concern. Rather than giving you a prescriptive answer for what that number should be, I'll let you determine it just from your own analysis for how many hours you think will be involved in permitting, design, and management. But again, think about hours, not necessarily project size or miles or things like that, and come up with your own sort of detailed analysis. Because if we feel like that number is too high, we will certainly ask you for that detailed cost schedule, and we hope you're going to have it as opposed to having just grossly estimated that cost.
Great. And we should
Yeah,
maybe get
we want-
moving to pro
Yeah.
forma unless there's any questions on the budget at this time.
Just one final point, Devin, on the CPE, that should reflect anything to do with subscriber activations. That should really be based on your take rate, not necessarily all the passings. So CPE equipment, ONTs, OLTs, drop cost, all of that should be tied to not just your full passings, but the actual take rate. That was one issue that we had. And okay, let's move on to the pro forma. So pro forma template. So the pro forma template gives us a project-based perspective on, let me go back to instructions here. It gives us a project-based perspective of your income statement, your balance sheet, and your statement of cash flows. Most of you likely know what those statements are, but maybe have not prepared them. We don't expect necessarily accountants here on the team or on the call necessarily, but you may have financial accountants preparing this. That's great. But the good news about our pro forma template is that you don't have to be a financial expert or an accountant to fill it out. There's just a few fields you fill out, and the magic of the way we designed it, the answers come up as far as that income statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flows. So again, it's pretty. I want to use the word dummy. It is a little bit dummy proof. It's you don't need an accounting degree, and it's pretty straightforward. So why do we require these pro forma templates in the first place? Is a question we often get. One is it helps us evaluate project sustainability. There is actually in the NTIA NOFO, it says specifically the eligible entity, meaning state of Illinois, shall require prospective subgrantees, yourselves, to submit business plans and related analysis that substantiate the sustainability of the project, of the proposed project. So that is something we have to do to evaluate sustainability. Generally, in broadband projects, as many of you know, having been in the business, you're going to be sustainable from a cash flow perspective because most of the costs are upfront related, right? Permitting, engineering, deployment, network equipment. The recurring expenses such as network operations, maintenance, backhaul, billing, marketing and sales are generally going to be a smaller percentage of the revenue. That may not always be the case if you're in some really remote areas where you have very few customers, very few passings. There may be some situations where your OpEx may be greater than your revenue, but that's going to be more of the exception. But that is one reason we collect these pro formas, sustainability. Secondly, and this is the biggest point of this, I would say, of my presentation, is that we want to make sure that what you're requesting from a grant perspective is really the whole in your business case. So when you prepare your financials and you do your statement of cash flows, you will have a return on investment. And if it's a negative return on investment or a negative NPV, that means you're earning, if it's a negative NPV, for example, just to talk about that, that means you're earning less than your cost of capital on the project. If it's higher, if it's plus, you're earning more than your cost of capital. If it's zero, you are commensurate with your cost of capital. Our program, and most states are pretty open about this, very clear about this, and their whole reference price is just based on this point here, that the grant request should be that amount that allows you to put in a matching contribution that allows you to earn your cost of capital and nothing greater. And so if your cost of capital may be 8%, 10%, 12%, somewhere in that range, we are trying to evaluate, are you earning that and no more? And so this model here allows us to efficiently look at that. And so I want to just stress that point. So that's point 2 on why we have these pro formas. The third point is, if you are in the rare exception, if you're asking for a match waiver, we'll want to look at, well, why, what is unique about the financials for this project to justify a match waiver? Meaning with that lower than 25% match, you are still earning a return that's commensurate with your cost of capital and no greater. So those are the 3 sort of reasons why we have these pro formas. Let's get to the actual pro formas themselves. So the first page is basically the instructions on how to complete them. And same point, anything that's not grayed out has to be filled out. But as you'll see quite quickly, and I mentioned this earlier, these are pretty user-friendly. Most of the fields are grayed. So if you just put in and I'll come here now, the key assumptions, and I'll go through them in a minute. If you fill those out, you will then allow us, you will have a completed pro forma within, I would say, this thing can be completed within 5 to 10 minutes, assuming you have all the numbers in the background at your offices, for example. So, and all of these assumptions will wind up going into the income statement, balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows. These are all interrelated financial schedules. For those of you who are accountants, you know that income statement is about revenues and expenses. The balance sheet is about your assets and how they're paid for in terms of liabilities and equity. And your cash flows then grab the income statement revenues, but it also does not include depreciation, so it backs that out and looks at just your cash flows and your net investment of your match to come up with your rate of return. So you can't just complete one without doing the other. They're all kind of interrelated, but we made that work easy for you. So let's just quickly do a demo here. So let's just say I am looking at a project that I believe it's a big project. Let's say $10 million. I'm going to need 4 years to deploy it. Okay, so I'll put 4 here. And as I mentioned, $10 million. Okay, and I want a grant of, let's say, $7 million. So I'm putting in a 30% match. Okay, so 70/30 is automatically calculated here. The depreciation, again, is not a cash-based expense, but it does have a tax advantage. And so that's why we collect that here. So I'm going to start depreciating in year 5. And let's say I depreciate my assets over 7 years. Recurring expenses, let's say my operating margin is 60%, so 40% expenses. So I'm going to just, again, put 10% here. We'll go 10, 10, 10, 10. Okay, 40%. Again, I'm not in any way indicating that these are the right numbers for your project. If anything, that's probably overstated. I'm going to go 30. But just so no one accuses me of saying we should, Sandeep said 40% is a good indicator. Okay, so 30% OpEx. Your tax rate, let's say, again, it's 25%. This grant will be distributed over 4 years because you've already indicated that's automatically calculated because of the point that up here you said it was going to be a 4-year deployment cycle. So we assume we're going to give the grant out over 4 years, and your match will equally be incurred over 4 years. And everything else is filled out here. So you're good to go. Then you come to the income statement, and that's where this is the only other major document that has to be filled out in the pro formas. So let's say I said a $10 million project. So let's assume $10,000 per location. So let's say 1,000 passings. So I'm going to put 1,000 here across the board. Okay. And I believe roughly, let's just say 70% of the people I pass will subscribe to my service. It's going to be 0% in the first 4 years because I'm deploying capital. And in year 5, most folks know about my project. Not everyone is a subscriber. So I'll say 50%, and then maybe 60% here. And I'll get to 70% here. And we'll just taper that off at 70%. And so there's a little bit of a nuance here with this round 2 here in terms of passings. So let me see if I can describe this eloquently. So passings are your unserved and your underserved locations that this network is able to serve, that you're going to be able to commercially offer service to. You may have some served locations that you're intentionally trying to connect. The NOFO from NTIA and our NOFO basically parallels that. You can hook up to 20% served locations. Now, we don't want to see too much overbuild, but because of the rules, you're entitled to get to 20% of those. So if our budget is directly paying for that, you would put those served locations here. But there's all these other served locations, and we know this because we've looked at your network maps, that you're passing to get to these unserved, underserved. So you're not asking for money specifically for those, but you are passing those, and those are customers who will likely subscribe to your service. You're the new game in town, likely offering fiber or some high quality generation of fixed wireless. And so we want to make sure that this pro forma recognizes the revenue from those customers. So let's just say I am passing 500 such locations. Okay. Yep. And so I'm going to put that here. And since my network won't be available until year 5, my take rate for those customers maybe just a little bit lower because they're served. There's another game in town, or was. And so I'm just going to maybe put 40 and I'll go up to, let's say, 65. Okay. So here we are. So we have 1,000 customers in year 14. Okay. And so those customers, oh yeah, let's see, ARPU. So that comes down to what are you on average charging per, based on the different price plans you have, what's the average revenue per user that each customer is going to contribute on a given month? And again, you can, let's just say $80. Again, some of these numbers will change. Your passings will go up over time as more as there's new housing growth. And for example, we hope that this program stimulates the economy. Your take rate might be higher over time. You may have more served locations that become customers. So you may have that. Your ARPU may go up. I'm just trying to be really simple here. But everything else is now filled out here. So again, just to repeat, it was a $10 million build, $7 million in grant, and $3,000 in 7 million in grant, 3 million in match. That's about an average cost of $10,000 per passing. And so you're putting about $3,000 on your own dime, and everything is filled out. And here you come to the answer. You are earning a 16% rate of return. Obviously, your own financial model may be more complicated than this. Some of your OpEx may not directly be linear to revenue. We understand that. You may have other expenses that are not on here, and you can certainly include those here, for example, other expenses that we haven't thought about. You may have other revenue that outside of broadband, you may have other revenue. It could be a triple play customer offering video, phone, or maybe even fixed wireless, as broadband providers are doing today. So we'll certainly want to see a very comprehensive overview of all your revenue and cost drivers. But it allows you to basically say, okay, I am earning a 16% rate of return. And we're obviously going to look at that return and compare that to your cost of capital. The discount rate here essentially reflects that cost of capital. Let me just talk about that for a minute here. The discount rate is basically your weighted average cost of capital. And the terminal value is based on what is this project worth in the very permanent long term. Some of your projects, and I know this from my days in NTIA as well as my days in my career in telecom, many of our projects will be likely in different hands in about 5-10 years. People buy these assets, are very, very important assets for a community, and they generate a lot of cash. And so the terminal value multiplier is essentially giving you basically credit from a valuation perspective. And if we did not have that, then we would be putting in more grant than what's warranted. So it allows you to basically tell the community and your board and anyone else that, hey, there's a real long-term intrinsic value for this project. And that for us, the good thing, and for the state of Illinois and the public interest, means less grant because there's long-term value in this project beyond the 14 years. And let's see, 14 years, I did mention that, may have mentioned that earlier. Why 14 years? Because we're really looking at, these projects take anywhere from 2 to 4 years to deploy. And then generally in accounting, you look at things on a 10-year basis. So that's how you got the math, 4 plus 10, 14 years. Let's see if there's anything else to talk about here before I go to questions. I think I've said this, but these performas are for each application. So if you're filing multiple applications, please do a separate performa for each application. And this is not the performa, again, for your company. It's a performa for this specific project that you're seeking funding for. So it's very project-based budgeting exercise or financial analysis exercise. Let's see. Some of you, my last point gets a little bit wonky in terms of accounting. I've seen performers come our way where you have the full grant amount included. And when you have the full grant amount, you defer, that grant amount becomes deferred revenue. And as you depreciate those grant funded assets, then that deferred revenue becomes revenue, which offsets depreciation expense. The analysis is going to, the conclusion is going to be the same. The ROI is going to be the same exact amount. We're just asking that this be the private capital that you're putting in right here and not the full project cost. Because if we had a full project cost, then we would have had to build this deferred revenue item. And that's easy to do, but this is just a more easy to understand perspective. So if you can run the same model with a deferred revenue basis, not using this model because we don't have that, but if you did it on your own, you'll come up with the same ROI. So anyway, that's a little bit of a wonky off-topic issue. But besides that, it's very easy. As I said, it'll take, if you have all the numbers, I'm sure your analysis will have been done before you get to this document. You'll already have your estimates about ARPU and take rates and your OpEx cash or your OpEx, your operating expense projections and so forth. That's all great. You need all of that before you can prepare this. And I'm curious if those of you out there, if you have your own model and you're seeing numbers, ROI numbers, and other things that are very, very different than this, I would love to hear about that. But I don't think that's going to be the case. But certainly open to that discussion. So, and you can certainly provide a narrative saying, "Hey, we have our own pro forma model. It's got some other nuances, and the ROI is a lot lower than what we have here." Love to hear that story if that's the case. But we are making this a mandatory assignment. We allowed in round one folks to complete their own pro formas using their own templates, and a lot of folks did not give us a comprehensive portrait into their financial picture. So it is a mandatory request this time around. That's all I've got, and happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Sandeep, for two really clear and thorough overviews. Great job. I'm going to lift up one question in the chat. I think everything else I had replied to in writing. But the question is how to find the served locations the network will pass. There is a way to see them on our project area selection tool, but is there a place to download them? So assuming that you have access to the FCC Fabric data, that's where you can access all of the location IDs for every location in Illinois. And so what we provide is our set of eligible locations, so unserved and underserved. And then really everything else you can consider a served location or a location that does not require BEAD funding. And if that doesn't totally make sense, feel free to shoot me an email and I can make sure that Shubika, who leads our mapping efforts, can get on the line with you to walk you through how to do that. All right. Any other questions on any of the three templates? Okay. Well, before we hop, I'm just gonna, I know we have had some questions about, how to access different resources. So I'm just gonna do a quick screen share of our website to show everyone where you can find different things. So this is our website. If you Google Illinois broadband, it's likely what will come up, but also dceo.illinois.gov/broadband. And the main information you'll need for BEAD is here, right at the quick links. Find information about the BEAD subgrantee selection process. And then we've got our project area selection tool, office hours information, our email address, a link to past webinars, which are all usually posted within the week, the notice of funding opportunity or NOFO, application guidebook, project forms, project area selection tool, and then essentially everything that we've gotten questions about in the past, we just drop down here. So we have CSVs and shapefiles for areas preliminarily awarded, FAQs, local coordination guide, eligibility, lots of other helpful documents here. So if there are no other questions, I see we are right at time and we can go ahead and close out. And so if you registered for this webinar, look out for a follow-up email, and otherwise all recordings and slides will be on our website. And thanks so much, everyone. We'll hopefully see some of you at office hours tomorrow at 1 p.m. Thanks a lot.